Okay, so in lesson 10 here, we're going to look at just some real-world problems, okay, using our vertical motion equation. And we've had a couple problems like this, but this whole lesson is just going to work with some more of them. H, okay, is your height. P represents time, and C represents like the initial starting height, where an object is dropped or launched from. Okay, V is the initial velocity when the object is let go or launched. Okay, and all of that is right here as well. Okay. So first problem says an object launched directly upward 64 feet per second from a platform that's 80 feet high. What is the object's maximum height, and when will it attain this height? Okay, so when we are looking at this, 64 feet per second is how fast it was launched. So that's our V, or the velocity. 80 is the starting height, so that's C. Okay, and the negative 16 represents our gravity, which we've used before in this unit. Okay, so when I start this one, I have to figure out what are they asking for. Well, they're asking for the maximum height and how long it takes to get to that. So if I think about a picture of this, okay, here's our object, and I want to know the maximum height. The maximum height is a vertex. So we want to find the vertex of our object. Okay? So we're going to do negative b over 2a, and that's going to give us our time. And then I take that time amount, put it back into the equation, and solve for the height. Okay? So negative b over 2a is going to give us negative 64 over 2 times negative 16. Okay, and so that's going to give us negative 64 over negative 32. Negative divided by a negative is positive, and 64 divided by 32 gives us 2 seconds. Okay, and then I have to take that number, put it in for T, and solve for H. Okay, we've done this throughout the unit as well. Okay, so I put 2 in, so now I'm going to have, and I'm going to use this space, that's okay. Negative 16 times 2 squared plus 64 times 2 plus 80. Okay, 2 squared is 4. Negative 16 times 4 is negative 64. Plus 64 times 2 gives us 128. Plus 80. Okay, so we have 64 plus 80. If I add negative 64 and 128, that's positive 64. 64 plus 80 is going to give us 144. So H is going to be 144 feet. Okay, so if we interpret the solution, we would say that it takes 2 seconds to reach a max height of 144 feet. Okay, and that's how we would find our vertex. Okay, we've done many problems of finding a vertex, and that's what this problem is asking for: maximum height and how long it takes to get there. Okay, so the next problem says a ball thrown from the top of a 128-foot tall building, so that's our C value, with an initial velocity of 32. Okay, that's our B, or now we're calling it B, or V. Okay, 32 feet per second. That's the initial velocity. How long is it going to take for the ball to hit the ground? So here's an example diagram of what it could look like. Okay. We want to know when is it going to hit the ground. So that tells us a height of 0. Okay. The ground is at a height of 0. So I'm going to take 0 and substitute that in for h. So now we have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 128. Okay, now we're solving to find solutions. Okay, and we've done a couple different methods of this. Okay, I always check, can I factor? Okay, so always check to see if you can factor first. And in this case, we can factor. Okay, we can take out a like variable here. Okay, I'm going to find a GCF. Okay, the GCF here is negative 16. So I'm going to take negative 16 out. Now I have t squared. Remember, when you find a GCF, you always want to get a to be positive. That's your goal. Get a to be positive. Okay? So then I have minus 2t plus 8, I believe. 128 divided by, or it's going to be minus because I have a positive divided by a negative, so it should be minus 8. I think 128 divided by 16 is 8. Okay? And then now I factor here. Factors of negative 8 that add together give me negative 2. So we have negative 16, not equals. And our factors of negative 8, and since a is 1, I don't need to do the whole 7 steps of factoring. Okay? Our factors of negative 8 are going to be negative 4, so I'm going to have t minus 4 and t plus 2. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. Okay, and we set it equal to 0. The negative 16 equals 0 is not a solution because that's not true. Then I set t minus 4 to 0. So I have t minus 4 equals 0 and t plus 2 equals 0. So I get t will equal 4 or negative 2. And since negative 2, you can't have negative seconds, that's not a solution. So our answer is 4 seconds until it hits the ground. Okay? So it'll be 4 seconds until the object hits the ground. Okay? So you have to just make sure you're understanding what to look for in the problem. Okay, if the height is 0, they want to know how long is it going to take to get there. You have to factor and find the solutions. Okay? If you can't factor, then you can use one of our other methods, okay, completing the square, or you can use the quadratic formula as well. Okay, quadratic formula always works. Okay, next problem. Launch from a 288-foot tall building, initial speed of 48 feet per second. How long will the rocket be at least 320 feet above the ground? Okay, so now this is another height, so they're telling me h is 320. So I'd substitute that 320 in for h and solve from there. So I'm going to have 320 equals negative 16t squared plus 48t plus 288. Okay. Now we're going to, in order to solve, this whole thing has to be equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract 320 on both sides, so it's equal to 0. And I can only subtract it from the like terms. So now I have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 48t minus 32. Okay. So now I've checked to see if I can factor, which I'll factor out GCF again. I can take out negative 16. So I have t squared minus 3t minus 2. Okay. And then I factors of negative 2 that add to give me negative 3. Oh, sorry. I made a mistake here. When I factor out GCF of negative 16, that's negative 32 divided by negative 16 gives me positive 2. There we go. So factors of positive 2 that add to give me negative 3, and that's going to be negative 1 times negative 2. Negative 1 times negative 2 gives me positive 2, and negative 1 plus negative 2 gives me negative 3t. So now I have 0 equals negative 16 times t minus 2 and t minus 1. Again, when a is 1, I can just go right to my two factors in the binomials. Now I set each of these equal to 0, so I have 0 equals negative 16. That's not a solution because it's not true. I have 0 equals t minus 2, and 0 equals t minus 1. So I have t equals 2 or t equals 1. Okay, and are those both possible solutions? Yes, they are. Okay, so you look, here's maybe at 1 second, and here's at 2 seconds. It's 320 feet above the ground. Okay, so our solution, the object, will be 320 feet above ground at 1 second and 2 seconds. Okay. An object is catapulted from the top of an 80-foot building with an initial velocity of 32 feet per second. Okay, so we need to write the equation this time. So we're going to have negative 16t squared, that's the gravity, plus 32 feet, because that's the initial velocity, or 32t, 32 is the initial velocity, plus 80, okay, because that's where it started. They want to know what is the highest point it reaches, so they want to find the maximum, they want to find the vertex again, and how long does it take to reach that height? So you have to do negative b over 2a again to find the vertex. So we're going to do negative 32 over 2 times negative 16, which is negative 32 over negative 32, which is 1. So I put 1 into our equation. 1 squared, so I have negative 16 times 1 squared plus 32 times 1 plus 80. Okay, so this 1 is the 1 second that it takes to reach the highest point. So how long does it take? 1 second. We answered part B. When I substitute this 1 back in, that's going to give me my height. Okay. So 1 squared is 1. 1 times negative 16 is negative 16. Plus 1 times 32 is 32. Plus 80. Negative 16 plus 32 is 16. 16 plus 80 is 96. So 96 feet is the maximum height. Then how long is the object at least 80 feet above the ground? So now they tell me h is 80. So I put 80 in for h. Now I have 80 equals negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 80. Okay, in order to solve, I need to get this equal to 0, so I subtract 80 on both sides. That cancels. Now I have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 32t, and the 80's canceled, so that's all I have. Then I factor, find GCF. Okay, GCF is going to be negative 16, so I have negative 16t. I can take a t out of both of them as well. Now, all I have left is t minus 2. Okay, and then I set both of them equal to 0. So negative 16t, okay, negative 0 equals negative 16t, and 0 equals t minus 2. Okay, I would divide by negative 16 here, so t would be 0, or add 2 on both sides, t equals 2. So how long is the object at least above 80 feet above, or 80 feet above the ground? We already know at 0 it's 80 feet above the ground because that's where it started, 0 seconds. So it also is at 80 feet after 2 seconds. So for 2 seconds, it's 80 feet above the ground, at least. Okay? That would be interpreting both of our answers. Okay, and then the last one, again, rocket launched from the top of a 24-foot tall building, initial speed of 92 feet per second. The height of the rocket is modeled by this. How long does it take for the rocket to hit the ground? Again, the ground is 0, so we have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 92t plus 24. See if I can factor. This time, okay, when I factor, I can't take 16 out of everything. I could take at least 2, but I want to check for something larger. See if I can take 4 out of each term, which I would be able to. Let's check for 8. Can't take 8 out of 92, but I can take 8 out of 24. So I'm going to factor out a 4 for GCF, and I'll make it negative 4. So now I have 4t squared minus 23t minus 6, and it equals 0. So now when I factor, I have to use all of my steps. Okay, so 0 equals negative 4, and now I find factors of negative 24 that add to give me negative 23. So now I'm going to have 4t squared minus 24t plus t minus 6. Okay, because negative 24 times 1 is negative 24. Negative 24 plus 1 is negative 23. Now I factor by grouping, so I have this group and this group. Find GCF of each, so I have negative 4. GCF for the first group is going to be 4t. And then what is left, I have t minus 6. GCF for the second group is 1. So then what I have left is t minus 6. Set them all equal to 0, or put them into my two binomials. So I have 0 equals negative 4. And then binomial of the outside, so 4t plus 1. And then t minus 6. Set them all equal to 0 and solve. So I have 0 equals negative 4. That can't be a solution. Then I have 0 equals 4t plus 1, or 0 equals t minus 6. Okay, so here I would subtract 1 on each side. So now I have negative 1 equals 4t. Divide by 4. So t equals negative 1/4 of a second, which isn't possible because I can't have negative time. Here I add 6 on both sides. So I get t equals 6 seconds. 6 seconds until that rocket hits the ground. Okay. Okay. So working with real life problems now and how quadratics may be used in the real world. Okay. Make sure you finish the notes, write down any questions you might have, and then we'll see you tomorrow.